I'm sorry, what do you mean I'm covering reception? Calla Monroe whispered, clutching her coffee like it was the last bit of sanity she had left. You're the only one here early and Marlene's kid has the flu, her manager Dana said, already halfway down the hallway. Just for the morning. You'll be fine. Calla stared at the front desk like it had personally wronged her. She was a junior graphic designer, not a receptionist. She didn't even like phones. Dropping her bag behind the desk, she sighed and pulled her hair into a loose bun. The firm was still quiet at 7:45 in the morning, and she figured she could at least answer a few calls and pretend she wasn't in the middle of a quarter-life crisis. She'd only taken this job 6 months ago after moving to New York with a suitcase and a dream that had already started to fizzle. Rent was high, her creative work was mostly being ignored, and now she was answering phones. Great. At exactly 8 o'clock, the front doors hissed open, and Calla glanced up. The man who stepped in didn't look like he belonged here. He was tall, broad shoulders, navy suit tailored like it had been sewn directly onto him, dark hair still damp at the ends like he'd just stepped out of a shower in some 5-star penthouse. He moved like he owned the building. Or several. His eyes caught hers cold blue, sharp, unreadable. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I'm here for the 10 o'clock with Mitchell." Calla blinked. "You're 2 hours early, I know." He didn't elaborate, just looked at her like he was waiting to see what she'd do. She cleared her throat, struggling to look away from his face. "Right, you can have a seat. Mitchell doesn't get in until 9, but I can let him know you're here once he arrives." He didn't sit. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and began scrolling, pacing slow circles like a lion in a cage. The man had the air of someone used to being in charge, and Calla was suddenly hyper-aware of her off-brand flats and the half-chipped polish on her nails. She tried not to stare. She failed. "You always cover reception?" he asked suddenly. She jumped. "No, I'm just filling in." He looked up from his phone. "What do you normally do?" "I'm a designer, visual branding, mostly junior." She winced at the way she added that last word like a disclaimer. He tilted his head slightly. "You like it?" She hesitated. "I want to." His lips twitched just slightly. "Honest?" Calla narrowed her eyes. "Are you always 2 hours early for meetings?" He stepped closer to the desk, resting one hand on the edge. "Only when I want to see what I'm walking into." "Really? And what did you see today?" He met her gaze. Something unexpected. Before she could respond, the elevator dinged and someone called his name. "Kieran." The man turned. Another suited guy was rushing out of the elevator, slightly out of breath. "Sorry," the other man said. "Didn't know you were already here." Kieran nodded once, then turned back to Calla and smiled, not wide but real. "Thanks for the warm welcome." She watched him walk away, her heart thudding in her chest for no good reason. Who was he by noon? The office buzzed with whispers. "That was Kieran West," Dana hissed as she returned to the front. "As in West Enterprises, as in he owns the real estate firm Mitchell's trying to land." Calla blinked. "He owns it? Every inch of it. He's a millionaire, probably more than that. And apparently he never shows up in person." Calla's stomach dropped. That man, the one she'd told she was just filling in, wasn't just some client. He was the client. And she'd been chatting with him like he was just some guy with great cheekbones and a weird habit of being early. She groaned into her hands. "I'm going to get fired." But she didn't. In fact, a week later, Dana came over holding a cream envelope. "This came for you." Calla opened it slowly, revealing a thick card with gold-embossed lettering. A personal invitation to a private gallery event, one hosted by West Enterprises. Her name was handwritten at the top. She frowned. "Why would I get one of these?" Dana raised a brow. "Maybe he liked your customer service skills." Calla stared at the card, heart pounding. She wasn't sure why, but something told her this wasn't business. Not entirely. The gallery was in Soho, sleek and modern, with glasses of champagne passed around by men in black vests and a string quartet playing something soft in the corner. Calla wore the only dress in her closet that didn't scream "on sale" and still felt completely out of place, until she saw him. Kieran stood near a large abstract painting, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Yet when he saw her, his face shifted. Something warm lit behind his eyes. "You came," he said. "You invited me," she replied, trying to hide how fast her heart was beating. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes." "I wasn't sure either," he stepped closer. "I'm glad you did." There was a pause long enough to feel like a moment. Then she asked, "Why me?" Kieran looked down at her, his voice quiet. "Because you didn't know who I was, and you still spoke to me like I mattered." "You do matter," she said before she could stop herself. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up. "So do you," her breath caught. And just like that, the night changed. He stayed close the whole time, introducing her to people, walking with her through the exhibits, never once letting her feel like she didn't belong. When she mentioned she loved a particular piece, he bought it, just like that. "You're insane," she whispered. He leaned in. "You said you liked it." "That doesn't mean you buy it." "It does when I can." She stared at him. "How rich are you?" He grinned. "Very." Calla laughed, then stopped when he looked serious again. "I want to see you again, Calla." She hesitated. "You mean like a date?" "No," he said. "I mean like again and again and again." Her heart flipped, and when he walked her out to a waiting car, his obviously sleek and black with leather seats and a driver in front, he kissed her cheek before the door closed. She didn't sleep that night. Not because she was nervous, because she was excited, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit already hooked. Calla had never been inside a car that could glide so quietly, as if the city didn't dare interrupt. The next night, Kieran sent a driver to pick her up from her apartment in Brooklyn. She almost didn't go. She'd stared at her reflection for half an hour, debating whether this was a dream she'd regret waking from. But when the driver pressed a handwritten note into her hand, her hesitation vanished. It read only, "Dinner." No pretense. The restaurant wasn't listed on any app, and the entrance was unmarked, tucked behind a flower shop. Inside, low golden lighting spilled over velvet booths and glassware that didn't dare make a sound. The host greeted her by name before she even spoke. Kieran was already seated at a table in the corner, a bottle of something sparkling already open between two crystal glasses. He stood as she approached, not smiling, just watching her like she was sharper in person than memory allowed. "You came," he said. "You keep inviting me," she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. He poured her a glass, then leaned back, watching her fingers lightly trace the rim. "Is it always like this for you?" she asked after a moment. "Hidden restaurants and private tables." "I don't like noise," he said. "And I don't care for strangers watching." "Because you're used to being watched," he tilted his glass, considering her. "Because people make assumptions. I've learned to keep my world small." She raised an eyebrow. "And yet you invited me in." "I don't do that often." The waiter arrived with plates she hadn't ordered, but everything placed in front of her was perfect. Her favorite pasta, a side of roasted vegetables, warm bread served with her preferred kind of olive oil. She looked up at him sharply. "I didn't tell you any of this," I asked. "Who, your manager?" "She mentioned you bring pasta from that cafe downstairs every Wednesday. The rest I guessed." Calla blinked. "You guessed my olive oil?" Kieran glanced at her plate. "You haven't stopped dipping the bread in it." She lowered the bread slowly. "That's either charming or deeply unsettling." He didn't look away. "I'm willing to risk unsettling." They ate slowly, the conversation shifting. He asked about her designs, not the ones she did for work, but the ones she kept in her sketchbook, the ones she didn't show anyone. She hesitated, then described a few concept posters for films that didn't exist, brand mock-ups for fictional companies. "You create for things that haven't happened," he said quietly. "I guess I do. You should make them real." She shook her head. "You don't just make things real. You need backing, connections, time." Kieran set down his glass. "You think I don't know that? I think you live in a world where money solves most things. And I think you live in one where you've never been told yes." She stared at him, heart tapping against her ribs like it might burst free. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "You could sit across from anyone tonight, so why me?" His answer came without hesitation. Because you're not impressed by me. That's not true, she said quietly. I'm just not impressed by what you own. His eyes didn't leave hers. That's what I meant. After dinner, they didn't go straight back. The car took them through Midtown, down avenues drenched in light and movement. At a red light, he reached across the seat and took her hand. You don't have to say yes to this, he said. I know I move fast. I know I don't always ask permission, but if you want to walk away, say it now. She looked down at their hands, his, smooth but strong, hers, paint still under one nail from the night before. I don't want to walk away, she said. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Outside her apartment, the air was cooler, the street damp from an earlier rain. He walked her to the door, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly like he was memorizing the way she looked in the low light. Tomorrow, he said, I'll send a driver again. She leaned against the doorframe. What's tomorrow? You'll see. The next morning at work, a package waited at her desk. Inside, a single envelope and a pair of tickets to a private branding conference hosted by one of the top design firms in the country. The kind of event she'd never be able to afford, let alone attend. The envelope contained only a note, written in the same neat handwriting as before. They'll be looking for someone like you. She sat back in her chair, stunned. Dana walked by and paused. Is that what I think it is? Calla nodded slowly. You didn't tell me he wanted to invest in your career, Dana said, crossing her arms. I didn't know he did. Well, he does, Dana said, and if you don't take that ticket, I will. That night, she met him again, this time in a rooftop lounge that overlooked the full sweep of the skyline. He didn't ask if she liked it. He just handed her a cocktail and said, you needed to see this. They stood side by side, the city humming beneath them. I've never been this high up, she admitted, sipping slowly. Then we'll keep going higher, he said. She turned to him, her voice quiet. You keep talking like this is going somewhere. It is, he said, and I'm not letting it stop. She didn't answer, not with words. She reached for his collar, pulled him down, and kissed him. There was nothing polite about it, no hesitation. Just heat and hunger, and the heady rush of a door swinging open before either of them could knock. He didn't speak after. Just held her face in his hands and looked at her like he was seeing something he hadn't known he was searching for. And for the first time since arriving in the city, Calla didn't feel like she was chasing anything. She felt like someone had already found her. Calla never used to pay attention to Monday mornings. They used to blur into each other, a rinse-repeat cycle of deadlines and lukewarm coffee. But now, everything buzzed with sharp, electric awareness. She didn't just wake up, she launched into the day, her pulse already racing before she even stepped into the elevator of her building. And Kieran West had everything to do with that. Do you always look like you're walking into a campaign shoot? She asked as he opened the door of the black coupe waiting outside her apartment building. It was the kind of car that didn't make a sound when it started, like even its engine knew it belonged to the elite. He held the door without answering, sliding in beside her once she settled into the leather seat. His cologne was different today, cooler with a sharper edge. Not that she was keeping track. Not exactly. I wanted to show you something, he said once the car pulled into traffic. It's not far. I'm starting to learn that when you say that, we could end up anywhere between the Upper East Side and Mars. I'll take you to Mars next week, he replied, adjusting the cuffs of his jacket. This week, I thought we'd start with something a little more grounded. The car pulled into a quiet block in Tribeca's sleek buildings with tall windows, the kind of addresses that never showed up on real estate apps because they were never really on the market. The place he led her into had no signage, no receptionist. Just a single door and a fingerprint scanner disguised as a brass button. Inside, the space was raw exposed beams, unfinished walls, but light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the river. Massive canvases leaned against one wall and a few digital screens flickered softly on another. Her breath caught. This is a gallery, she said softly. It's going to be, he corrected. Yours. She turned to him too fast. What are you talking about? I bought the space, he said. And I want you to run it, curate it, fill it with whatever you think deserves to be seen. You bought it, for me, for your work, and for the kind of work the world doesn't know to look for yet. She took a step back, shaking her head. You can't just hand me a gallery. I'm not handing you anything, Kieran said. This isn't a gift, it's an investment. You have vision, Calla, you just haven't had the infrastructure to build on it. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. You hardly know me. He stepped closer, the air between them tightening. That's not true. I know how you see things, I know how you think. I know you'd rather say no to something safe than yes to something that doesn't feel real. She pressed her palms to her temples. You move too fast. I don't believe in waiting for things that are right. Calla laughed once, bitter and breathless. You say that like I'm supposed to just fall in line. No, he said quietly. I say it because I'm not afraid to admit I want more than just a few nights with you. Her heart kicked so hard she thought it might bruise a rib. You're serious. I've never been more. She looked around the room again, the weight of it all pressing down. A gallery. A space. A future she hadn't even let herself imagine, her fingers curled into fists. I haven't even told you the worst parts of me, she said suddenly. He didn't flinch. Then tell me. My father left when I was 11. I haven't seen him since. My mother works nights in a hospital in Michigan. I didn't go to Parsons or Pratt. I learned design from YouTube tutorials and pirated software. I've been broke more times than I can count, and there are still days I think the city is trying to chew me up and spit me out. Kieran's gaze didn't waver. And I've spent my whole life trying not to owe anyone anything. Then don't owe me, he said. Work with me. For how long? As long as you want. There was silence between them, long and hard. Then she reached out and touched the edge of one of the blank canvases. It'll need a lot of work. That's what I'm best at. They left the building as the sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the street. He didn't take her back to her apartment. Instead, they stopped on the rooftop of a tall building on Park Avenue, where a single table had been set under string lights and a private chef stood near a small open-air kitchen. You're not real, she muttered under her breath as they sat. I'm very real, he replied. You just haven't been treated like you are. Dinner was warm and strange and perfect. She told him about her first freelance gig, a logo for a dog walking service run by a woman who paid her in grocery store gift cards. He told her about the first time he lost $500,000 on a failed tech partnership when he was 24. I thought I was finished, he said. I thought I'd ruined everything. But you didn't, she said. No, he agreed. But I needed to be reminded that failure isn't fatal. She studied him then, not the suit or the watch or the expensive wine he barely touched. She looked at the man underneath, the one who moved through the world like he was always 5 steps ahead, but still had the capacity to look at her like she was the only thing worth watching. I don't know how to trust this, she admitted. I won't ask you to, he said. Not yet. Just trust yourself long enough to see where it could go. She hesitated, then reached across the table and laced her fingers through his. The look he gave her then wasn't triumphant. It wasn't proud. It was reverent, as if she'd just handed him something sacred. When he walked her home that night, he didn't kiss her. He just said, "You'll know when you're ready." And she realized, for once, she believed him. Calla stood in the center of the gallery, her eyes scanning the freshly painted walls and the new track lighting that now glowed softly against the white surfaces. The scent of sawdust and matte varnish still lingered, not entirely unpleasant. It was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass wall that overlooked the river. Outside, the sky was heavy with dusk. She hadn't told anyone besides Kieran, Dana, and the contractor about the opening next week. She needed to feel it first to believe this space was truly hers before others walked through it. The paperwork had been finalized 2 days ago. Her name now sat on the lease. And against every reasonable instinct she'd ever had, she'd signed it. The door clicked open behind her. "You're early," she said, not turning around. "I've been early since the day we met," Kieran replied, his voice warm. You'd think you'd be used to it by now. She finally turned, and her breath caught not because of the suit or the way his presence seemed to pull the air tighter, but because of the way he looked at her. His gaze held none of the sharpness it had when they first met. Now it was open, grounded, as if he'd already pictured her standing here 100 times before it ever happened. I had a meeting downtown, he said, walking toward her, but I couldn't concentrate, because of this, because of you. She folded her arms, half amused. You're still terrible at being subtle. I don't believe in subtle, he said. I believe in clarity. She tipped her head. Then be clear. What happens after this? You stop holding your breath, he said. You stop wondering whether you deserve good things. And you start calling this space your own. She walked past him, trailing her fingers along the edge of the new display table. I didn't want to be someone's project. You're not. Then what am I? He stepped in front of her, gently pressing his hand against her cheek. You're the only person who's ever made me want to build something that doesn't have my name on it. Her throat tightened. You never talk about your mother. He blinked, caught off guard. Why now? Because you've seen every corner of my past and I've barely seen yours. He exhaled slowly, then leaned against the wall beside her. She died when I was 17, car accident. She was picking up a second job because she thought I needed a better laptop for school. Calla didn't speak, she just waited. My father had already left. I was alone after that, no aunts, no uncles, just a bank account and an empty house. She stepped closer, her voice quiet. That's why you never stay anywhere long. I didn't have anything to stay for, he said, until now. They stood in silence for a long moment, then he reached into his jacket and handed her a folded piece of paper. What's this? She asked. Design mock-ups. I hired a sign maker this morning. The gallery needs a name. She opened the page and froze. Across the top in clean, modern lettering it read, Monroe Gallery. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the letters. You didn't ask me, no, he said, but I knew you'd say yes. She looked up, eyes shining. Because you think you know me so well, no, he said softly. Because I love you. The words landed between them like thunder, no build-up, no hesitation, just truth. She stared at him, heart pounding. You didn't even flinch. I've known for weeks, and you waited. You needed space to believe it on your own first. She stepped into him, her hands pressing against his chest. I love you too. His breath caught, and for a second, he looked like a man who'd just been handed back something he thought he'd lost forever when he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was sure, solid, like the foundation of something that had taken its time to grow roots. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his. I have something else to show you, he whispered. She raised an eyebrow. What now? He slid a key into her hand. Penthouse, West 27th Street, gallery's yours, but so is the rest if you want it, she blinked. Wait. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to let me share everything, not just the city, not just dinners and rooftops, all of it. Her eyes searched his face for any trace of uncertainty. There was none. You sure? She asked. I bought a second coffee machine, he said. That's how serious I am. She laughed, the sound bubbling out of her chest. Okay, yes, I'll try. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and when they finally left the gallery, the lights inside stayed on. A week later, the gallery opened to a curated list of artists Calla had handpicked herself. Critics called it a striking debut of raw, unapologetic creativity. A few weeks after that, she received a call from the editor of a prominent design magazine, asking for an interview. Kieran never hovered. He came to every event but always stood back, letting her shine. He didn't need to be the headline. Not anymore. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the lights of the city flicker awake, he slid his arm around her waist. You know, he said, when I walked into that office the first time, I was 2 hours early on purpose. She turned to him slowly. Why? Because I like knowing what I'm walking into. That day it was you. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. And what do you think now? He kissed the top of her head. That I found the only thing I didn't know I was missing. And in the quiet that followed, no words were needed. She had walked into a life she hadn't expected, and stayed. Calla stood barefoot on the heated marble floor of the penthouse bathroom, towel wrapping her damp hair as the sunrise filtered through the frosted glass. The light painted the room in amber and rose, catching on the corners of the mirror where she'd pinned a few Polaroids one of the gallery's opening night, one of her and Kieran on the balcony in winter coats, and one he'd taken of her laughing uncontrollably, eyes closed, head thrown back. The gallery had been open for 3 months now. 3 months of curated shows, sold-out nights, and a feature in a design publication that had once politely ignored her internship application. She'd hired a small staff, just 3 people, but they were sharp, sincere, and didn't flinch when she made bold calls about what to feature. She finally felt like she wasn't simply filling a role, she was defining it. Kieran had kept his word. He supported without controlling, asked without assuming, and somehow always knew when to challenge her just enough to make her think harder, reach further. He hadn't missed a single opening, but he never stood beside her for the cameras. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew whose name was on the door. She stepped out into the bedroom, where warm air from the fireplace met her skin. Kieran was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through something on his tablet, dressed in gray slacks and a deep blue sweater with the sleeves pushed up. He looked up when he heard her, setting the tablet aside. "Still planning to wear paint-stained jeans to the board meeting?" he asked, a faint lift in his brow. She tugged on a cream blouse and shot him a look. "They're vintage." "There's a difference. You argued with a museum director last week about the ethics of overcuration, and now you're wearing a shirt with a hole in the back," he said, rising. "You're becoming alarmingly consistent." She stepped into her pants and grinned. "And yet you still invite me into your world." "I didn't invite you," he said, walking over to button the top of her shirt for her. "You built your own door and kicked mine open." As she reached for her boots, a call buzzed on his phone. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it. "Everything okay?" she asked. He hesitated. "It's the West Foundation board. They're pushing for a new investment direction, something I don't agree with." "You don't have to keep holding everything yourself," she said, crossing to him. "You've built an empire. Let some of it carry its own weight." He ran a hand through his hair, tension flickering behind his eyes. "It's not about the money, it's the principle. They want to cut the arts division entirely and reroute the funds to another real estate deal." Calla stilled. "The grants," he nodded. "Yours wouldn't have existed if they'd made this decision a year earlier." She stepped closer. "Then fight for it." "I plan to." That afternoon, Calla met with a young sculptor who'd traveled from Mexico City to show her a portfolio in person. His hands trembled as he laid out the piece's abstract shapes cast in recycled metal, inspired by protest walls and street echoes. She listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and by the end of the hour, offered him a residency through the gallery's new artist in housing program. He blinked in disbelief, then hugged her so tightly she had to laugh. Later, as dusk fell, she made her way to the West Foundation's downtown offices. She hadn't told Kieran she was coming, but she knew he'd be in the boardroom and she needed to say what he wouldn't. The receptionist tried to stop her, but the moment the elevator doors opened and the board saw her stride into the room, heels sharp against the polished tile, the room fell silent. "I know I don't belong in this conversation," she began, her voice calm but unyielding. "But I'm here because the decision you make today won't just affect numbers on a spreadsheet. It'll end futures before they begin." One of the board members, a silver-haired man in a dark green suit, frowned. "Miss Monroe, this isn't—" "I'm not done," she said, holding up a hand. "You think you're playing it safe by redirecting funds, but art is not a luxury, it's a language. You cut this program and you silence voices that are already struggling to be heard." Kieran hadn't moved from his seat at the head of the table, but his eyes were locked on her, steady, proud. When she finished, he stood. "She's right," he said. "And if this board can't see that, then I'll remove my capital and start something new, one that understands that profit without purpose is just greed in a suit. The room erupted in murmurs, but Kieran didn't wait. He walked out with Calla beside him, fingers brushing hers as they stepped into the hallway. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "I wanted to," she replied. "You've fought for me since the start. Let me return the favor." That night, they sat side by side on the penthouse balcony, a bottle of wine between them. The city pulsed below, but up here, it was quiet. Calla leaned her head on his shoulder, his arm draped around her waist. "I used to think love was supposed to make you lose yourself," she said. "But with you, I feel more like myself than I ever have." He kissed the top of her head. "That's how I know it's real." She turned to face him. "Then let's make it permanent," his brow lifted. "Are you proposing to me?" "I'm proposing we stop pretending we're still figuring it out," she said. "Let's stop waiting. Let's build the rest of it now." Kieran stood, took her hands, and pulled her up with him. "Tomorrow we'll go to City Hall, no press, no spectacle. Just us." "Perfect," she whispered. They married the next morning in a sunlit room with arched windows and a quiet officiant who barely got through the vows before Calla started laughing through her tears. Kieran kissed her like they had all the time in the world, and maybe they did. A year later, the Monroe Gallery had expanded to a second floor. The Artist in Housing program had supported 12 residents from 6 different countries. Calla's designs were being used in international campaigns, and her name was now listed on the advisory board of the West Foundation, which remained fully funded arts division intact. Their home was filled with mismatched art and warmth, and a piano neither of them played but both insisted was necessary. On weekends, they walked the High Line with coffee in hand, arguing about sculpture placements and whether or not raisin bread was a crime. Every now and then, Kieran would look at her over a shared dinner or a late-night movie and say, "You're still unexpected." And every time she'd reply, "You're still early." But they were always exactly where they were meant to be together.